Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond the limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it'll help getting our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck, on Roku, and Amazon Fire TV on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content going deeper within on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are speaking with Anna Carr. Anna is the director at Carr Competencies. She supports emerging and established leaders in deepening awareness, self, team, culture, and growing meaningful and productive relationships at work and to work. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Enrique. It's so good to finally meet you.
It's wonderful to meet you. And I know as a fellow practitioner and fellow coach, we're going to be engaged in a very great conversation. And folks, we'll be speaking about awakened leadership, building relationships that matter. But before Anna, we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. As you said that, I'm like, yeah, one of my first relationships was with a tree, because I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere in remote Western Australia. So that experience really, all your childhood is formative for everybody. But I didn't have any relatives. I had a mother and a father and a brother and a tree and our pets, lots of pets. So it was quite interesting because it was like a cross-cultural experience, another country. And so there was all sorts of ground there for looking at things in different ways. And I ended up like staring at the sky a lot. My dad was a scientist, and so he would set us out in the middle of a thunderstorm and watch and explain what was happening so that it wasn't scary. And yeah, that was extraordinary. And then I moved quickly through communications and community development phase, in which I learned that my job of helping one person at once wasn't going to make a difference to a lot of people. So I kept going up big picture into what would make a difference for the economies of people that I'm working with. So I then went into sort of an academic phase and looked at how do we buy into our local communities rather than sell out to an industrial something or a chemical something that has huge opportunity and potential with it. So and then sustainability was my final sort of resting place there, where I learned to how do we keep alignment between our economic systems, our social systems, and our environment systems upon which we all depend. So then I went into the public sector and discovered that nothing that I knew made any difference to anyone at all. And I was a terrible leader. So that's the nutshell of it. Yeah. Oh, one thing I want to tell. I had the grand opportunity as an academic to travel, and I was in Oregon and Eugene. And this is possibly the highlight of that period of my life. I was the bodyguard for Donna Haraway, who's a renowned academic, and that was fantastic. I thought I'd hit the big time before I hit reality.
Wow, a bodyguard. Never would have guessed it. But you met interesting about your story. You talk about your father being a scientist And today I was having a conversation with my son. He says, "Hey, Dad, I created this character, and it's all about you, except that he's a scientist." And I said, "Son, I'm a scientist. I'm a meteorologist and an oceanographer. So yes, I know about science." So a funny thing, weather obviously being the center point there, and I've spent many a times trying to discuss and describe and relate the things of weather to my children. So it was nice to hear that part of your story as well. Now, Anna, we're talking about relationship. You spoke real quickly about this tree, but as leaders, people in leadership, we are always constantly having to build relationships. Often not, we see folks destroy relationships with their leadership, right? Because of the way they are, how they speak, and the effects that they have from the stance of poor leadership. Let's talk about self awareness, because in building relationships, you have to be keen on who you are in order to make that relatable to somebody else. So, how do you guide leaders in developing deeper self awareness? And why is that often the starting point for meaningful change in the workplace?
Yeah, how do I guide people? It's the 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 first answer is any which way. No, there are no right ways for this. It can come as a sudden impact or something that's really noticeably wrong, like a trauma or something awful, but it can also come quietly. So everything starts in relatedness. And for me, until I recognized who I was relating to in myself, I could not easily relate to other people. So I see that it moves the leadership awareness, developing leadership awareness in others, moves through cycles. It's like you see a vision and you want to go there and you want to get that thing done, but what's in the way of that is often that's where you or I too had to really reflect and allow for mistakes, to allow for completion. Not some mistakes, but there's bumps along the road. You cannot go past them. You can't go through them. You can't avoid them. But developing that, like the vision and then the completion of something, and then you go back and start again. It's like an inchworm or one of those things that goes out and then it comes back in. Plus, to learn how to free ourselves, myself, other people, from the make wrong of themselves, of other people, of what's right, what's all the shoulds, the morality of that takes something, and then the untethering all of it to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. It's like, oh, how did I get under these flickering fluoro lights? Oh, well, you know. So I like to ask other people as well, what's something that you're aware of about me that I may not be able to see for myself? So that requires a sense of the vulnerability and the trust required for that. But it gets honed. It hones by taking action, and then you find out, and then you self-reflect. So, yeah, actually, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Anais Nin, who said, "Oh, you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as we are." So that there's a lens that we're looking through, that if you're not conscious that that's what is happening, then awareness itself is not able to expand. So, and it helps to be real, like along that process. And to just, for me, owning all of those terrible shadows in who I was and how I was being, it's like, okay, that was how it was then. But being real about it and not trying to shuffle them under the mats, that helped. So that's a long answer to a short question, but that's how I roll.
No, and that very powerful because one thing is to become aware of something you're doing and say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I was doing that." Another thing is to have the vulnerability and say, "Hey, I might not know it all. How about you tell me something that I might not know and or realize that I'm doing that can help me, help you, and help us as I am leading you." Ultimately, if you become aware yourself or someone shares it with you, unless you take some action, it's just information, right? So great way to guide folks and bring them to place where they can take action on that awareness. Now, relationship building, obviously you have to be in a relationship with yourself. You have to love yourself, you have to know yourself, treat yourself, and all those things. But it translates to somebody else, especially in the workforce and when you're building teams. So, what are some common challenges leaders face in truly understanding their team's dynamics? And how can they become more attuned to the unspoken needs or undercurrents?
The unspoken. I love that. I think that's the reference that, yeah, that's just a beautiful way of articulating that, because it is in the background. It's the what's not said but is loudly heard, or if you have got some awareness. So, but it's having, I think, from a leader's perspective, it's having the humility to to say I don't know, and tell me. I remember one time one of the people in my team, um, there was some issue or some problems, and I like at the time I was having judgments or assessments about what was going on. But when I could recognize that I was thinking that, and just put it aside and ask a question, which was, what's happening for you? And then really listen, then I could understand. And then I wasn't no longer listening for what was happening in here. I was listening to her, really to her. And my attention was with her. And then I began to listen behind the words and under the words for her, what she was caring about, what was important to her. And then I was able to begin to hear the unspoken bits that are going on all the time. Um, but it took presence of mind, like being able to see or hear the constant inner chatter, but not think that it's separate from what's happening in the world. So, yeah, one of the things that I am really clear about at the moment is that it's about care. If we care for someone, if we care for who's in our team, what they're doing, how they're being, then it shows up not as caregiving or being caretaking. No, it's actually attending to and prioritizing that person who's right there, not in here.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
beautiful to be in tune with a person that you are having relationship with to the point where you are shut off in order for them to be brought to life. And you can see, I almost see it like a matrix thing. You're moving things apart, you, and oh, I can see that behind what you're saying. Oh, okay, now I understand.
Mm.
Oh, wow. Okay, so let's talk about that. And that attention to the other person is so powerful. You mentioned care, and in today's team dynamics, as a team grows, as a company is growing, they build this thing they call culture, right? And care is one of those things that are embedded into the culture of a company. So, talking about culture, in your experience, what are the key ingredients to creating a culture where trust and connection are not only encouraged but expected.
Yeah, this is going to perhaps surprise you. Okay, so I think what's necessary for trust and connection is the experience of disconnection, distrust, conflict. When you get real with what you're thinking, what someone else is thinking, if there's something that's in here, we're going to look at it. So I don't think you can go around conflict and distrust. You need to have that grown zone, in the middle where teams really get to know each other well, like at really grassroots. No, I'm not going to say grassroots. It's like when you get dirty hands, is that expression? You get your hands dirty. You get down in with each other, and yeah, I can see that you really do get that. Um, and you're being with that experience despite it being horribly uncomfortable, horrible in how we may have been brought up or what we, all of those sorts of things. But I think I'm going to use the word propensity because I love saying that word. The propensity to recognize and address what my fear of an interaction or my anxiety about how something's going or someone else's fear and anxiety or carelessness, apathy, like resignation, all of the things that get in the way, they're necessary to build culture. I, and one of the things that builds it least is, I'm going to say invulnerability, just thinking or thinking I know, like talk, don't talk to me now. I'm too, all of those things. I'm too busy, arrogance. I'm speaking about myself here. So I remember going through these things and like look back and I think, wow, it's useful because that's how culture grows. Yeah.
And you said something so powerful, and we both know it because of our ontological study and being with.
Mm.
Being with is so powerful because it's not just the knowledge that it's there, but how are you being with that in your midst? How is that affecting you? And in a way where you may not even realize that you are snappy, right? That you are doing this thing that everybody's like, man, there he goes again, right? But you don't see it. But being with, it's just like when you mentioned about the talk with a person and just concentrating and giving them the space and the freedom and the attention. Relationship growth requires that. And being with and knowing how you are being with in the midst of something is powerful too. And as we talk about relationships and growing that, what are some practical ways leaders can intentionally build and sustain productive relationships across different levels of an organization, especially in this hybrid or remote settings that we find ourselves in today?
Yeah, intentionality, that's a good one. So I'll start with the extreme, I guess. Um, the conversation that I was referring to, I would have had probably 15, 16, 17 years ago, something like that, when I was still in the public sector. And I forgot to tell you that I left and I went into coaching and facilitating, right? But one of my experiences that I was so fortunate to have in a public sector role was experiential leadership, meaning I went out into the bush, into the extraordinary Kimberley region of Western Australia, and with like 29 other people, and really got to know who those people were, who I was, how we were together. went in one way, came out very differently related to every single one of those people. And that's an extreme version, but any form of that learning by experience with people is phenomenal for developing and deepening a relationship. But there's also, the everyday, the ways that you specifically build relationship. And when that's an intention, I'm thinking about in my last year or so of being a public servant, I had the great fortune of working in reconciliation in and with and alongside Indigenous colleagues, First Nations, people from around Australia. And I discovered that they'd never met. They were always online. They had never actually, they'd been talking to each other for years in some cases, one or two, like quite often, but they'd never met. So I'm like, no, not on my watch. We're going to bring people together and then invest that time in those relationships. Again, it's a care. You can't do reconciliation without people. So, but then there are ways in which you can, in fact, consciously intend relationships with oneself by reading widely, listening to lots of podcasts. Good on you. Thank you for having yours. Writing. So I learned something in North America when I was there from a friend of mine in Eugene, whose mother lived in New York, and I had these grand visions of her in this upstairs apartment where my friend's mother died. And so my friend went to help to clean out all her stuff and found all of these, a bookshelf. I'm looking over here, it's where my bookshelf is, full of little notebooks. And on the outside of the notebook was MOPJ. I'm like, what? My friend was like, what does that mean? What is it? And she discovered that her mother had written a diary or a journal every day, moments of pure joy, and had captured it. So I was so inspired by that. I decided to do the same thing. And that was also a long time ago now, but every night I get to complete the day by recognizing what was joyous, what went well, what didn't go so well that I could forgive or let go of, put it back, understand it, sleep well. So that was a way of me getting out of my own head back onto paper. And I did do for a little while some, really intense writing, which is very rewarding.
You mentioned intentionality, right? I did mention this piece, an element of leadership is so crucial. Your story reminds me of how intentional that lady was to write all this, right? And we will never know the full meaning as to why she did, whether she was wanting to pass it down. But when my mother passed, me and my brother did that task of going through things and came across songs that my mom wrote. At least I did not have any idea that she did. And so since then, with the help of technology, I've put music and made those songs live. And I listen to them as if she was singing them, although they have been, digitized. But what a wonderful way to carry out your life. Intentionally doing one thing can affect somebody else so much broader than just your today. And it's so important for leaders to understand that when you remove intentionality from your leadership, you starve your future followers. You starve them. And so be intentional. Now, all of that leads to impact, right? As leaders, we want some sustained impact, something that makes us really relish the opportunity to lead people. When leaders focus on awareness and relationships, what kind of long term impact have you seen on their teams or organizations? And can you share a powerful transformation story along those lines?
I can't share a single one, like a story, because there are too many stories. Because I think the minute that we become genuinely aware, self-aware, and aware of our impact on other people, aware of the culture we're building around us, aware of how we show up, how others are showing up around us, and then really build in the relatability, relationship. That's the word I'm looking for. How genuinely build that, because it takes time and care, therefore care. So I'm unwilling to share any stories of my coachees because they're confidential. You know, that's their stories. That's putting that aside. So I'm left with stories of myself, which I could also tell, but it would be in a particular context. But I can just I can share something from the meeting I had just before I spoke to you today, which is around how, you know, awareness of who and how we are being can fundamentally shift something for other people in the world. So there's an impact with other people when we get to understand who we are for ourselves. So I think I've said that twice, but during the week, I think, okay, I had 5 or 6 such conversations. So I was talking about moral injury around naval crews who were forced to deal with a situation where crew members were plucking children who had drowned out of ships at sea, called Children Overboard here in Australia. Talking about the deep connection of a Ngalago man, First Nations man, with his whole history, colonisation, he referenced, his mother, who he'd bought a lathe for, who was now having in her latter years, like senior years, the time of her life, polishing opals. And the story of overcoming lateral violence, being able to move something into a value that was there, but the impact there's impact that keeps coming into the next generation. So I've been thinking and talking and writing about stewardship. How do we go beyond ourselves in service of others, including ourselves, not excluding? We're not an either or, but also moving into, once we've got that part, it's like, what can we do to create something in the future which isn't there yet? And then having all of those intentional conversations to bring that about with people. Doesn't happen individually, happens in teams. So I can't give you one story, but I'm so grateful to have had, you know, every day I have conversations that just reinforce for me that, you know, getting outside of our own perspective, there's so much more to the inspiration and encouragement story when it's shared. So something grows out of a conversation that's deeper than either of us, you know? So that's the impact right there. It's like every minute, oh, wow, that was extraordinary. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I've often seen that when I share a moment of awe with someone in conversation, that they light up because they like, oh, I just told him something he didn't know, right? Or but but life is so dynamic that we could have tons of awes in what we do and how we act in the relationship that we have. And as leaders, we have to remember the outside perspective. It should be one of the things that we strive to pull out, because life events where you don't grow from, why have them if you're not going to grow, right? And you should see or at least apply that outside perspective for you to expand. And as leaders, we sometimes think we're here, there's no room to grow, so now I'm just giving. No, because then life, you'll be cheated out of it. uh,
Mm.
Daily ahas is what I aim for. And I've had a ton of them with you, Anna, today. So thank you for sharing your perspectives on leadership and relationship and how those things all come together. Now, what do you have coming up? What are you currently working on where our viewer or listener can follow you or support you?
Thank you. Um, I've been doing a lot of thinking and writing and talking about stewardship. So there's a series of articles that I am writing, and it's horrible. Writing is difficult sometimes, but that is a commitment of mine. Um, so reading the articles and then workshops actually with people about going deeper. What does it mean to have these commitments to our future where we get to be responsible, care deeply? So those questions. One of the things I've just thought of is like, I want to do a 30-day challenge on stewardship, a 30 days of how do we actually really focus on this weirdly abstract thing, but it is right here, right now. So, and if anyone is interested, I'm up for, the partnership around these goals. So that's because like there's always space to grow, and thinking and writing about these topics has been such a privilege, but it rests on conversations with people. So please get in touch.
Now, folks, we're going to have all the links necessary for you to be able to get a hold of Anna. I know she's written a book, so I'll make sure to put that also in the show notes for you to get a gander at her book. And I just want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.